Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks, and this week, one of the rarest guitars in the world, a 1958 Gibson Flying V. Well, the year is 1958, and although they may not know it, Gibson are on the cusp of what would prove to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest year in their history, with the introduction of no less than half a dozen new designs, including, but not limited to, the Sunburst Les Paul Standard and the ES335. A frenzied period of innovation instigated entirely by the success of Californian upstarts Fender, who, with the introduction of the Stratocaster in 1954, had really captured the zeitgeist in a way that as of yet had eluded Gibson. Its futuristic design, its space-age themed name, and its sunburst finish really spoke to a younger generation who, spurred on by the success of Strat-wielding Buddy Holly and the Crickets, flocked to Fender's new flagship model in their masses. And thus, in early 1957, Gibson president Ted McCarty assembled a team to design three new groundbreaking models, collectively known as the Modernistic series, that were to be so outlandish they would cause a stir at the NAMM show. The first of which, the Modern, thanks to a lukewarm response by prospective dealers, thankfully never made it to production. But both the Futura, what we would now know as the Explorer, and the Flying V would both go on to become future classics, yet at the time were an unmitigated disaster, selling less than 150 guitars combined over their 2 years of production. The Flying V being responsible for just 98 of those. So, what went wrong? Both the Flying V and the Explorer were like nothing Gibson had ever produced, both in terms of their shape and their construction, both featuring Gibson's innovative new patent applied for humbucking pickups, and both assembled from Carina, the American trade name for West African hardwood limbar, that it's speculated was chosen because of its appearance and colour, which bore an uncanny resemblance to a certain single cutaway Fender introduced in 1951. Couple that with the fact that, a year earlier, Gibson had used Carina in the production of their Skylark lap steel, so there was no doubt some spare stock already floating around the factory. Unlike the Les Paul, the control configuration moved away from Gibson's typical 4-knob layout in favour of a more streamlined 3-knob layout, still with individual volume controls for each pickup, but one master tone control. There was also a piece of black ridged rubber along the lower edge of the guitar that was no doubt in recognition of the fact that, at least while sat down, the Flying V is a bit of a nightmare to play, to say the least. The Gibson Gazette, the company's magazine, heralded the V's arrival as a design for the future that was to be a real asset to the combo musician with a flair for showmanship, but appears to have been wishful thinking. Retailing at $247.50, roughly $2,600 in today's money, the V appears just to have been a little too modernistic for its own good, with only 81 shipping in 1958 and 17 being shipped in 1959, which, including known prototypes, brings the grand total of Flying V's in that period to around 100. guess in the years that followed, of course, the likes of Lonnie Mack and Dave Davis and Albert King would really go a long way to putting the Flying V on the map where it deserved to be. But in 1958, as Joe Bonamassa put it in a recent visit to Norm's Rare Guitars,
think about it, if you were a kid, this was like $265 in '58, and you convinced your parents to buy you an electric guitar, and you walked into a shop like this in '58 and said,
your parents just
I'll
said,
take the V-shaped one, not that one, son.
Yeah.
You know, and that's basically why they stopped making them. They made a couple batches.
It was too futuristic for the.
It was way ahead of its time. But you know, in 2019, it's just super cool.
So needless to say, with so few Flying Vs having shipped in 1958 and 1959, it is somewhat rare, to say the least, to come across an original example. But believe it or not, that is exactly what I have here today, at guitar auctions at Gardner Holgate in Bath in the UK. Now, Gibson's ledgers actually show this guitar shipped on April 30th, 1958, which makes it a pretty early example. At some point in its last 65 years, it's been refinished once or twice, and unfortunately the neck has also been skinned down to a fairly slim profile, but crucially still got its original pickups and its electronics, which sound incredible. The tuners have been replaced with the originals having perished at some point, and although it still has its original bridge, part of the post has sheared inside the guitar at some point, which means that the new posts now sit proud of the bridge. Amazingly, possibly even rarer actually than the guitar itself, is the fact that it comes with its original hard case, which in 1958 would have set you back $75, which is about $800 in today's money, which is just staggering. I think anyone would pay that for a case, but believe it or not, they did, and it's still in incredible condition, and seeing that accompanying the guitar really is a rare sight. The guitar's provenance is pretty much unbroken actually, and detailed beautifully on Gardner Holgate's website, so I'll leave all the relevant links down in the description box in case you fancy bidding on it as well. As I said, September 5th it's going to be going to auction, and honestly, because they are so rare, it's hard to really say if there's a precedent set for how much this is likely to fetch, especially with its one or two issues. I guess technically it is 20 times rarer than a burst, give or take, and you're not really going to be getting much change out of $350,000, maybe $400,000 for a burst at this moment in time. So if you do fancy bidding on this guitar, just a word of warning, you'll probably need fairly deep pockets. Thankfully, in recent years, we've been somewhat spoilt when it comes to great quality reissues of those original Carina Vs, with everyone from Gibson Custom Shop to Epiphone, actually, more recently having put their stamp on these iconic instruments. And it's one such example I'm going to play you out on today's video. It's a very heavily modified, caveat, very heavily modified Joe Bonamassa Epiphone Amos Flying V from a few years ago that belongs to a good mate of mine, Ed from Tones Twins TV. I've featured the guitar on the channel in the past. It is a staggeringly good instrument. it really is amazing, that much the same as the original, is an absolute nightmare to play while sitting down, so you'll no doubt see me wrestling with it on the outro of today's video. But again, as with the original, the trade-off being that incredible tone. Flying Vs really are unique. So if you've got probably the better $500,000 floating around in your back pocket or down the back of the sofa, I do know of a good one going at Garden Holgate. All the relevant links down in the description box if you're feeling flash. As ever, I'm Chris Buck. This is Friday Fretworks. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon if you haven't already, and I shall see you next week for another episode. Cheers, guys. Take care. See you soon.